A wonder of the modern era is the sheer convenience with which we can travel to faraway places. We are enabled to move frequently and far, while still retaining our relationships with friends and family. Not only that, but we are liable to meet many more new people, often from far away themselves. You are not nearly as moored to your home community as you would have been even 100 years ago. In fact, it has become somewhat of a norm that for various reasons, most commonly education and career related, you will end up living in different cities, states, even countries. And every time you move, you will leave some connections behind. Not really, though, right? Technology has allowed us to connect with anyone virtually anywhere in the world at any moment. And the ubiquity of air travel makes return visits feasible even for the average person. I was made to ponder this during my recent trip to my home state of Colorado for my stepsister's wedding. Friends and family from coast to coast coalesced for the occasion. Florida, New York, Kentucky, California, and Nevada. I believe one of the groomsmen, a Marine, even came from deployment in Asia, making it a global affair. We all live in different places, having our own experiences and pursuing our own paths, yet we are still able to maintain a sense of family and come together in relatively short order. The ancients had no such luxury. Messages were delivered only as fast as a messenger, and travel was slow, imprecise, and often dangerous. In settled societies, at least, the average person would not leave the vicinity of their local area their entire lives, unless out of necessity, usually meaning war. Even as recent in history as the European colonization of the Americas, uncertainty, toil, and great risk accompanied travel. When colonial governor John White left the colony of Roanoke for what was supposed to be a quick supply run to England, he was waylaid by war for 2 years, and upon his return, the colony was gone. Not just abandoned or destroyed, not a single trace of the colony's existence remained. No buildings, no bodies, not a chair or musket to be found. It's as if all of his friends and family vanished into the void. I would have no such issues now. I can fly to England and be back tomorrow if I want, and the whole time broadcast every step to anyone in my life. But if there is one thing I have learned about the conveniences of the modern age, it is that few of them have come free from repercussions. Hard to notice, subtle second and third order consequences that take years to manifest, which is precisely what makes them so insidious. It is no coincidence that people today are lonelier and their sense of community shallower than ever before. Such a topic goes far beyond the scope of this discussion, but no doubt our tendency towards transience and dispersion exacerbate this phenomenon. At the most basic biological level, humans are tribal. Even the vast, powerful empires and nations of history were built upon a network of countless smaller communities, bound by identities that lay within and in a way beyond the broader culture. We often think of leaning on friends and family in times of hardship, but consider what this might mean in older times. When war, famine, plague, or any other variety of disaster struck, kith and kin were not just there to give you encouraging words. Your mutual survival depended on one another. The people you grew up with were an intimate part of your life in a very visceral way. You were bonded by the daily struggle of existence. Such a life was no doubt more difficult, but it is not a stretch to imagine the sense of community was deeper. There was a purpose and proximity that is simply hard to replicate in modern conditions. If you have been part of a competitive team, fraternal organization, the military, or other such brotherhood, you have experienced a degree of this. No doubt life today is better with friends and family, but you can get by without it. There is very little real incentive to become meaningfully involved in your local community, or even to go beyond cordial relations with your neighbors. All necessities are provided either by the state or corporate entities, and online social networks provide easy surrogate social outlets with both complete strangers and people in your life. Imagine an ancient Athenian or Anglo-Saxon who carries his father's spear and stands shoulder to shoulder with his brothers in the shield wall, trying to wrap his head around the notion that there are men in modern times who will only see their fathers and brothers a couple times a year, or even less. There is something we have lost. I can call my best friends. I can fly across the country to visit them and them to me, an amenity beyond the people of the past. But in exchange, we are separated from each other in a way the people of the past often were not. What of the future, though? The modern world is fragile, splitting at the seams as we speak. And the coming age will most likely be more of a return to the baseline of human existence. And I fear what that entails for a population whose networks are so physically distant. Transition periods are always the hardest time, historically, both into more civilized periods and out of them. The shift into the modern age was hard on many people. The rugged frontiersman was shackled and marginalized when he had nowhere to run from the shadow of civilized living behind him. But during the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, the opposite was true. The warriors and brigands thrived, while the civilian population endured whatever calamities came their way. If terrible civil strife or anarchy were to strike, how vulnerable would I be? And worse, how vulnerable would the people I care about be? What capability would we have to coalesce and be self-sufficient when the surplus and security we rely on no longer exists? Functionally, we would be alone, with no easy way to get together. This dispersion suddenly becomes a liability. But what is the solution? Society today is built upon transience. You have to move for work, education, and other opportunities. Culturally, small town living is derided as limiting, and purposefully living in the same community as friends or even families sometimes is seen as weird or stifling. Inevitably, part of the solution will come with changing conditions. When you are dealing with problems that are so environmental, you cannot make all of the progress without the environment itself changing. You can punch the bag day in and day out, but only time in the ring will make you a real boxer. Necessity breeds adaptation. That being said, how do we maneuver ourselves into the best position to be as prepared as we can for when the future comes? The answer is to organize, to create networks binding those close to you in both a metaphorical and physical sense, with the ultimate goal of building a tribe. It starts with shifting our conceptions of friendship, family, and community away from their shallower modern iterations. We must remember that our relationships are not just a connection between two individuals, but transformative bonds that create something greater than the sum of its parts. And a tribe is many of these bonds that are in turn tied together to create something truly transcending its individual members. This may require something more than simply enjoying the company of others and being nice to one another, but also a sense of duty, loyalty, and obligation to those we care about. Try to engage in meaningful endeavors with your friends and family. Collaborate on projects and find ways to leverage opportunities for one another. Endeavor to better yourself and improve your skill set so you can better help those in your life and in turn inspire them to reciprocate. A group requires standards with commitments to fulfill and values to uphold. These standards, though, are for it to enforce internally. It must always put its own before the whims of outsiders. The cultivation of reliance on each other, and as much sovereignty from the state, corporations, and the general public as possible is critical. This does not mean closing yourself off from the wider world. In fact, you should be doing everything to attain resources and power within existing structures for yourself and your tribe. Do not be afraid to be active in your physical community, making connections and winning their respect. And if they are worthy, consider their inclusion in your tribe. One notable thing about Mormons I've been told by both believers and those outside the faith is the degree to which Mormons are involved in their localities, and the way they ensure other Mormons are offered opportunities and positions of influence. You do not have to agree with their theology to see the sense in a sound strategy. This all may sound like I am saying to collectivize, and I am to a degree. Collectivizing is a concept that is scary to the modern Western mind, conjuring specters of communism, where you're entirely subsumed into a vast, featureless horde to serve the state. Ironically, though, that is precisely what you get when each individual has no obligation beyond themselves, an endless supply of featureless, fungible units to plug into the economy. Would you call the American revolutionary leaders who formed brotherhoods with one another and exhorted their countrymen to revolt with the phrase, "United we stand, divided we fall," communists? Would you call the pioneers who crawled west, circling the wagons to fight off attack, communists? Of course not. Ironically, out in the wilderness, pioneer communities function more like the tribes or clans of Native Americans did, rather than as direct extensions of the federal government. To operate as a group with your collective interests in mind, underscored by true love and camaraderie, in service of a history you wish to honor and a legacy you hope to pass on, that is what being part of a tribe is. As for the transients, we cannot deny the role that physical proximity plays. Technology in many ways can be leveraged to our advantage in rebuilding these networks. But no matter how digital the world becomes, being close to one another literally cannot be replicated. This is the hardest to overcome in current conditions. But when you are deciding where you may plant your roots, you might want to consider the locations of the people in your tribe. And wherever you do settle, you would do well to seek these meaningful connections with your neighbors and others around you, in the hopes that these strangers and you may become friends and family. Perhaps most importantly, you must entirely reconsider what is worthy to pursue in life and what your ultimate goals while on this mortal coil are. The boomer mindset that you toil in honest hard work and then enjoy your bounty until you expire has to die with them. Do not even get me started on the suicide cult worldview of the millennials, the generation that proves beyond a shadow of a doubt the pitfalls of modernity. Your goal must not be mere material excess, leisure, and comfort, but that you play your part in passing the torch of something grander onward, something better than you and your tribe, because you and your tribe strive for it to be so.